A waitress thought her life was ordinary, until a Mafia attack changed everything. Claire must survive, outsmart her enemies, and navigate the dangerous world of Dominic Castellano. Don't miss a second. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday night. Claire Harper wiped down table 7 for the third time that hour. The vinyl booth squeaked under her rag. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old fryer oil, same as always. She glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until closing. 13 minutes until she could lock the doors, count her tips, and walk the 6 blocks home in the dark. Same routine. Every night. For 3 years. Claire didn't mind the loneliness anymore. She'd learned to wear it like a second skin. The bell above the door chimed. She looked up. 4 men walked in. They didn't look like her usual customers, truckers, insomniacs, the occasional drunk stumbling in for eggs. These men wore expensive suits. Dark wool. Pressed shirts. Shoes that probably cost more than her rent. But it wasn't the clothes that made her stomach tighten. It was the way they moved. Like wolves. The first man was older, silver-haired, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He scanned the room with cold, calculating eyes. Behind him, 2 younger men flanked the fourth. And the fourth man, Claire's breath caught. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His suit fit him like it had been stitched onto his body. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and felt too little. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Power radiated off him like heat. The silver-haired man gestured toward the corner booth, the one in the back, where the lights flickered and nobody ever sat. Claire grabbed 4 menus and walked over, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "Evening," she said, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heartbeat. "Coffee." The older man nodded. She set the menus down and went to grab the pot. Behind the counter, her hands shook. "Get it together, Claire." She poured 4 cups without spilling a drop. Brought them over. Set them down gently. "Need a minute to look over the menu?" she asked. The man in charge, the one with the dark eyes, finally looked at her. Really looked. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't interest. It was assessment. Like he was measuring whether she mattered. "Just coffee," he said. His voice was low. Controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to be obeyed. Claire nodded. "Let me know if you need anything else." She turned to leave. That's when the door opened again. The bell chimed. But this time it felt different. Heavier. Claire looked toward the entrance. 3 men stood in the doorway. Leather jackets. Tattoos creeping up their necks. One of them had a baseball bat resting on his shoulder. The air in the diner went still. Claire's instincts screamed at her to move, but her feet stayed frozen. The man with the bat smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Well, well," he said, his voice thick with mockery. "Didn't expect to find you here, Dominic." Dominic. So that was his name. Claire's gaze flicked to the corner booth. Dominic hadn't moved. His expression hadn't changed. But his men had. The silver-haired man's hand disappeared beneath his jacket. The younger 2 shifted, their bodies angling toward the door. "Walk away, Luca," Dominic said quietly. Luca laughed. "You don't give orders anymore. Not after what you did. Last chance." Luca's smile widened. "We're not here for a conversation." He swung the bat. And everything exploded. The silver-haired man drew a gun. One of Luca's men lunged forward. A shot cracked through the diner, deafening, violent, final. Claire dropped to the floor behind the counter, her heart slamming against her ribs. This isn't happening. This isn't real. Another shot. Glass shattered. Someone screamed, maybe her, she couldn't tell. She pressed her back against the counter, hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. Breathe. Just breathe. Footsteps pounded across the floor. A body hit the ground with a sickening thud. Then silence. Thick. Heavy. Suffocating. Claire waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then a voice, low and calm, cut through the quiet. "You can get up now." She opened her eyes. Dominic stood 5 feet away, looking down at her. His suit jacket was open. There was blood on his white shirt. Not much, just a smear across his ribs. His expression was unreadable. Behind him, 2 of Luca's men lay on the floor, unconscious or worse. The third was gone. The silver-haired man holstered his gun like it was nothing. Claire's legs trembled as she stood. Her hands gripped the counter to keep from falling. "Are you hurt?" Dominic asked. She shook her head. He studied her for a moment, then glanced at the mess, the shattered window, the overturned chairs, the streaks of blood on the tile. "This is going to bring attention," the silver-haired man said. "We need to move." Dominic didn't respond. His eyes stayed on Claire. "What's your name?" he asked. "Claire. Claire." He repeated it like he was filing it away. "You saw what happened here tonight." It wasn't a question. She nodded. "Then you have two choices," Dominic said, his voice still calm, still controlled. "You can call the police. Tell them everything. And spend the rest of your short life looking over your shoulder." Claire's throat tightened. "Or," she whispered, "or you come with me." "Would you trust him?" Claire stared at him. Come with him. It wasn't an invitation. It was a calculated offer wrapped in a threat. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic tilted his head slightly. "Luca's men saw you. They know you work here. They'll come back. And when they do, they'll assume you helped me. But I didn't. It won't matter." The silver-haired man stepped forward. "We're wasting time." Dominic raised a hand, silencing him without a word. His gaze never left Claire. "You have 30 seconds to decide." Claire's mind raced. "This is insane. I don't know these people. I don't know what they're involved in." But she knew enough. She'd watched men get shot in her diner. She'd seen Dominic stand perfectly still while chaos erupted around him, like violence was just another Tuesday. And she'd seen the look in Luca's eyes before he swung that bat. These weren't men who forgave witnesses. "If I go with you," she started, her voice shaking. "What happens to me? You'll be safe. For how long?" Dominic's expression didn't change. "As long as you need to be." That's not an answer. But it was the only one she was going to get. Claire looked around the diner, the cracked vinyl booths, the flickering neon sign in the window, the coffee pot still warming on the burner. This place had been her entire world for 3 years. Small, predictable, safe. But that safety had just shattered like the window behind her. She took a breath. "Okay." Dominic nodded once. "Let's go." They moved quickly. Dominic's men swept the diner, checking for cameras, wiping down surfaces. The silver-haired man made a phone call in a language Claire didn't recognize. Within minutes, they were outside. A black SUV sat idling at the curb, its windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. One of Dominic's men opened the back door. Dominic gestured for her to get in. Claire hesitated. "Once I get in that car, there's no going back." But when she glanced over her shoulder at the diner, at the blood still pooling on the tile, she knew the truth. There was no going back anyway. She climbed inside. Dominic slid in beside her. The door shut with a heavy final click. The driver didn't wait for instructions. The SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the night. They drove in silence. Claire sat pressed against the door, her hands clenched in her lap. Her pulse still hammered in her ears. Dominic sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the window. She snuck a glance at him. Up close, he looked different than he had in the diner. Older maybe. Not in years, but in weight. Like he carried something heavy that never went away. The blood on his shirt had dried into a dark stain. "Are you hurt?" she asked quietly. He turned his head slightly. "No. But the blood. It's not mine." Claire swallowed. "Of course it's not." The city lights blurred past the window. They were heading north, away from her neighborhood, away from everything familiar. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe." "You keep saying that. But what does it mean?" Dominic finally looked at her fully. His dark eyes studied her face, searching for something. Fear, maybe, or weakness. "It means you're alive," he said. "And you'll stay that way as long as you do exactly what I tell you." Claire's stomach twisted. "This is a cage. A beautiful, dangerous cage. What if I want to leave?" "You don't. You don't know that." Dominic leaned back against the seat, his expression unreadable. "You're still here, aren't you?" She didn't have an answer for that. 20 minutes later, the SUV pulled through a set of iron gates. Claire sat up straighter, her breath catching. The house, if you could even call it that, loomed ahead. It was massive. 3 stories of stone and glass, surrounded by manicured lawns and security lights that lit up the driveway like daylight. This isn't a house. It's a fortress. The SUV stopped in front of the entrance. Dominic's men got out first, scanning the area with practiced efficiency. Then Dominic opened his door and stepped out. He looked back at Claire. "Come on." She climbed out on shaky legs. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the doorway, older, elegant, with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled into a tight bun. "Sir," she said with a slight nod. "Rosa," Dominic replied. "Prepare the east wing. She'll be staying there." Rosa's gaze flicked to Claire. There was no judgment in her expression, just quiet assessment. Of course, Rosa said. This way, miss. Claire looked at Dominic. He met her gaze, his expression still unreadable. Get some rest, he said. We'll talk in the morning. Then he turned and walked deeper into the house, leaving her standing in the doorway with a stranger. Rosa led Claire through a maze of hallways. Everything was pristine. Marble floors, expensive artwork, chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a museum. It was beautiful and utterly lifeless. They stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. Rosa opened it, revealing a bedroom that was bigger than Claire's entire apartment. A king-sized bed, a fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds. There's a bathroom through there, Rosa said, gesturing to another door. I'll have clothes brought up for you. Claire just stood there, overwhelmed. Rosa's expression softened slightly. You're safe here, miss. Mr. Castellano doesn't make promises lightly. Mr. Castellano. So that was his full name. Dominic Castellano. It sounded dangerous. Because it was. Rosa left, closing the door quietly behind her. Claire stood in the center of the room, her heart still racing, her mind spinning. What have I done? She walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling grounds, the gates, the lights. I'm trapped. But deep down, she knew the truth. She'd been trapped long before tonight. At least now, her cage had locked from the outside. What would you do in her place? Claire didn't sleep. She lay on top of the expensive duvet, still wearing her work uniform, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it. The bat swinging, the gunshot, the blood pooling on the diner floor. This is my life now. She didn't know what that meant yet, but she knew it wasn't temporary. When the sun finally crept through the curtains, she sat up, her body stiff and aching. There was a knock at the door. Come in, Claire said, her voice hoarse. Rosa entered carrying a tray, coffee, toast, fruit. Good morning, miss, she said, setting the tray on the side table. I've laid out some clothes for you in the closet. Mr. Castellano would like to see you at 9. Claire glanced at the clock. 8:17 a.m. What does he want? Rosa's expression remained neutral. He'll explain. Then she left. Claire forced herself to eat a few bites of toast, but her stomach was too tight to manage more. She opened the closet. Inside hung several outfits, simple, well-made, in her size. How did they know? She didn't want to think about it. She chose a pair of dark jeans and a plain sweater, showered quickly, and braided her damp hair. At 8:58, there was another knock. This time, it was one of Dominic's men, the younger one from last night. Miss Harper, he said with a slight nod. This way. He led her downstairs, through more pristine hallways, until they reached a set of double doors. He knocked twice, then opened them. Miss Harper, sir. Dominic sat behind a massive desk, reviewing documents. He didn't look up immediately. The man left, closing the doors behind him. Claire stood there, unsure whether to sit or speak. Finally, Dominic set down his pen and looked at her. Sit. She sat in the chair across from him. The silence stretched. Dominic leaned back, studying her with that same unreadable expression. How did you sleep? He asked. I didn't. That'll pass. Claire doubted it. Dominic folded his hands on the desk. We need to establish some ground rules. Rules? You're under my protection now. That comes with conditions. Claire's pulse quickened. What kind of conditions? First, you don't leave this property without my permission. Her stomach sank. So I'm a prisoner. You're alive, Dominic corrected, his voice calm but firm. Luca's crew won't stop looking for you. If you step outside these gates alone, you won't make it a mile. Claire's hands clenched in her lap. Second, Dominic continued, you don't contact anyone from your old life. No friends. No family. No one. I don't have family, Claire said quietly. Something flickered in Dominic's expression, brief, almost imperceptible. Then that makes things simpler. She looked down at her hands. What about friends? Do you have any? The question stung more than it should have. No, she admitted. Dominic nodded slowly. Third, you follow Rosa's instructions. She'll assign you tasks. Keep you occupied. Tasks. You're not a guest, Claire. You're going to earn your place here. Claire looked up sharply. I didn't ask to be here. No, Dominic agreed. But you chose to get in the car. He's right. She hated that he was right. And if I break these rules, she asked. Dominic's gaze hardened. Don't. The meeting ended. Claire was escorted back to her room, her mind spinning. I'm trapped. I'm completely trapped. But as the days passed, she began to understand the strange rhythm of her new life. Rosa assigned her small tasks, helping in the kitchen, organizing the library, tending to the greenhouse. It wasn't hard work, but it kept her hands busy, kept her mind from spiraling. And slowly, she began to notice things. The house was always full of people, but it was never loud. Men in suits came and went at all hours. They spoke in low voices, their conversations clipped and coded. Dominic was always working. She rarely saw him, but she felt his presence everywhere. In the way the staff moved. In the way the house seemed to hold its breath when he was near. He was in control of everything. Except, maybe himself. 2 weeks in, Claire was in the library when Dominic walked in. She looked up, startled. He didn't acknowledge her at first. He crossed to the window and stood there, hands in his pockets, staring out at the grounds. Claire set down the book she'd been shelving. "Do you need something?" she asked. "No." But he didn't leave. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy. Finally, Dominic spoke. "You're adjusting." It wasn't a question. "I don't have a choice," Claire said. "There's always a choice." She almost laughed. "Is there?" Dominic turned to look at her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, guarded eyes, held something she hadn't seen before. Curiosity. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "Should I be?" "Most people are." Claire crossed her arms. "I've seen what you're capable of. But I've also seen worse." Dominic's gaze sharpened. "Have you?" She didn't answer. But something passed between them in that moment. An understanding. They were both survivors. Just in different ways. Dominic stepped closer, his voice lower now. "This life I've pulled you into, it's not going to get easier." "I know. Then why haven't you tried to run?" Claire met his gaze. "Because I have nowhere to run to." The truth of it hung in the air. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, and left the library without another word. Claire stood there, her heart pounding. What just happened? She didn't know. But something had shifted. Is he protecting her, or controlling her? The nightmares started a week later. Claire would wake in the dark, drenched in sweat, her heart racing. She'd see the diner. The blood. Luca's smile. Sometimes she'd see Dominic, standing over her with that unreadable expression. And sometimes she'd see herself, running, always running, but never fast enough. She stopped trying to sleep through the night. Instead, she'd wander the house. The staff learned to ignore her. She was just another ghost in the halls. One night, she found herself in the kitchen at 3 a.m. She made tea, her hands shaking slightly as she poured the hot water. "Can't sleep?" Claire spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway, dressed in a t-shirt and sweatpants. His hair was slightly disheveled. He looked human. "I didn't mean to wake you," Claire said. "You didn't." He crossed to the counter and poured himself a glass of water. They stood in silence, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. "How long have you lived like this?" Claire asked quietly. Dominic glanced at her. "Like what?" "Always looking over your shoulder. Always waiting for the next attack." He took a sip of water. "My whole life. Doesn't it get exhausting?" "You get used to it." Claire shook her head. "I don't think I ever will." Dominic set down his glass. "You will. You're stronger than you think. You don't know me. I know enough." She looked at him, searching his face for answers she couldn't name. "Why did you really bring me here?" she asked. Dominic's jaw tightened. "I told you. You could have sent me away, given me money and new identity. But you didn't." He didn't respond. "So why?" Claire pressed. For a long moment, Dominic just looked at her. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Because I saw something in you that night." "What?" "Survival." Claire's throat tightened. "You didn't scream." Dominic continued. "You didn't beg. You assessed the situation and made a choice. Most people freeze. But you didn't." "I was terrified." "I know. But you didn't let it control you." The weight of his words settled between them. "I'm not like you," Claire whispered. Dominic's expression darkened. "No, you're not." And for some reason, that felt like the saddest thing he could have said. The next morning, Rosa found Claire in the greenhouse. "Mr. Castellano would like you to join him for dinner tonight," Rosa said. Claire looked up from the tomato plant she'd been tending. "Dinner?" "Yes, miss. 7 o'clock. In the dining room." Claire frowned. "Why?" Rosa's expression remained neutral. He didn't say. At 6:55, Claire stood outside the dining room doors, smoothing down the simple dress Rosa had laid out for her. "This is ridiculous." But she pushed open the doors anyway. The dining room was massive, long table, crystal chandelier, too many chairs. Dominic sat at the head of the table, already dressed in a fresh suit. He looked up when she entered. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair closest to him. Claire sat. Moments later, staff brought out food, pasta, roasted vegetables, wine. It was more food than Claire had seen in weeks. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Dominic spoke. "Tell me about your life before the diner." Claire looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because I want to know." She set down her fork. "There's nothing to tell. Everyone has a story." Claire's hands clenched in her lap. "Mine isn't interesting." Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Try me." She didn't want to talk about it, but something in his gaze, patient, steady, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he'd understand. "I grew up in foster care," Claire said finally. "Moved around a lot. Never stayed anywhere long enough to matter." Dominic didn't react, but she saw the slight shift in his posture. He was listening. "When I aged out, I bounced between jobs. The diner was the longest I'd stayed anywhere." "Why?" "Because no one bothered me there. I could just exist." Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I understand that." Claire looked at him. "Do you?" "More than you know." There was something raw in his voice. Something real. For the first time, Claire saw past the armor. And what she saw was a man who'd been alone for far too long. "Do you think this is love or survival?" Things changed after that dinner. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. But in small, quiet ways. Dominic started appearing more often. In the library while she read. In the greenhouse while she worked. He rarely spoke. But his presence felt intentional. Like he was learning her the way she was learning him. One afternoon, Claire was in the garden when she heard shouting. She looked up. Two of Dominic's men were arguing near the south entrance, their voices sharp and angry. Then one of them shoved the other. Claire stepped back instinctively. Before things could escalate, Dominic appeared. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He said something low and controlled, and both men went silent. They dispersed immediately. Dominic's gaze swept the area and landed on Claire. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then he walked toward her. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." Dominic glanced back toward where his men had been. "They won't bother you again." "I wasn't bothered." "Good." He didn't leave. Claire tilted her head. "You don't have to check on me every time something happens." "Yes," Dominic said simply. "I do." The weight of those 3 words hit her harder than she expected. "He's protecting me. Not just from others. From everything." "Why?" she asked. Dominic's expression tightened. "Because you're my responsibility." "Is that all I am?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Dominic's gaze darkened. "What do you want me to say, Claire?" "The truth." He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "The truth is you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be anywhere near me. But you are. And now I can't." He stopped. "Can't what?" Claire whispered. Dominic looked at her like she was a problem he couldn't solve. "I can't let you go." That night, Claire couldn't sleep again. She sat by the window, staring out at the dark grounds. "I can't let you go." What did that mean? Was it control? Protection? Or something else entirely? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She didn't want to leave. And that terrified her more than anything. The following week, everything fell apart. Claire was in the kitchen when Rosa rushed in, her face pale. "Miss Harper, you need to come with me. Now." "What's wrong?" "Just come." Rosa grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the east wing. They moved quickly through the halls until they reached a room Claire had never been in before. Rosa pushed her inside and locked the door. "Stay here," Rosa said. "Don't make a sound." "Rosa, what's happening?" But Rosa was already gone. Claire pressed her ear to the door. Voices. Footsteps. Doors slamming. Then gunshots. Claire's blood went cold. "They found us." She backed away from the door, her heart hammering. "Stay calm. Stay quiet." More gunshots. Closer now. Claire looked around the room. No windows, one door, nowhere to hide. She was trapped. The door handle rattled. Claire's breath stopped. "Please. Please no." The door burst open. And Dominic stood there, blood streaking his face, gun in hand. "Come with me," he said. "Now." Claire didn't hesitate. She ran to him. Dominic grabbed her hand and pulled her into the hallway. They moved fast, his grip firm and unyielding. Behind them, she heard shouting. "Go, go, go!" Dominic barked. They reached a staircase. Dominic shoved her ahead of him. "Don't stop." Claire ran. Down the stairs. Through a narrow corridor. into a garage she didn't know existed. Dominic's men were already there, engines running. He pushed her into the back of an SUV and climbed in beside her. "Drive," he shouted. The SUV peeled out of the garage, tires screaming. Claire looked back. The house, her prison, her sanctuary, was under siege. Men poured through the gates. Gunfire lit up the night. And then they were gone, speeding into the darkness. Claire's hands shook. Dominic was on the phone, barking orders in that low, controlled voice. But when he hung up, he looked at her. "Are you hurt?" Claire shook her head. Dominic's jaw clenched. "Good. What just happened?" Claire whispered. "Luca's men found us." "How?" "I don't know. But I will." The rage in his voice was quiet, controlled, lethal. Claire looked down at her hands. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't find us." "And then what?" Dominic's gaze met hers. "Then I finish this." "Would you trust him?" They drove for hours. Claire lost track of time, lost track of direction. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by empty highways and dark forests. Dominic barely spoke. He sat rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. Finally, the SUV turned onto a dirt road. They drove deeper into the woods until a small cabin appeared in the headlights, isolated, hidden, barely visible through the trees. "We're here," Dominic said. The driver parked. Dominic's men got out first, weapons drawn, sweeping the area. When they signaled all clear, Dominic opened the door and turned to Claire. "Let's go." The cabin was sparse. One main room with a fireplace. A small kitchen. 2 bedrooms barely big enough for beds. But it was warm. And it was safe. Dominic's men stationed themselves outside. Inside, it was just the 2 of them. Dominic locked the door, checked the windows, then turned to face her. "You need to rest," he said. "I'm not tired." "Claire." "I said I'm not tired." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. Dominic studied her. "You're in shock." "I'm fine." "You're not." Claire crossed her arms, her body trembling despite herself. "What do you want me to say? That I'm scared? That I don't know if I'll survive this?" "You will." "You don't know that." The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. Dominic stepped closer. "Yes, I do." "How?" Claire's voice broke. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I won't let anything happen to you." The certainty in his voice stopped her cold. She looked up at him, searching his face. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Dominic's expression shifted. Just slightly, just enough for her to see the crack in his armor. "Because you remind me of something I thought I'd lost." "What?" He hesitated. Then quietly, "Hope." Claire's breath caught. Dominic turned away, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "You should get some sleep," he said, his voice harder now. "We move again at dawn." He walked into one of the bedrooms and shut the door. Claire stood there, her heart pounding. Hope. She didn't know what to do with that. Claire didn't sleep. She sat by the fireplace, watching the flames flicker and dance. Around 3 a.m., Dominic's door opened. He stepped out, dressed in the same clothes, looking just as restless. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. Dominic crossed to the fire and sat down beside her. They sat in silence, shoulder to shoulder, the warmth of the fire washing over them. Finally, Claire spoke. "Tell me about your life. Before all this." Dominic's jaw tightened. "There is no before. This is all I've ever known. You weren't born into this." "No, but I was raised in it." Claire looked at him. "What happened?" Dominic stared into the fire, his expression distant. "My father ran the Castellano family. I was supposed to take over when I was ready." He paused. "But when I was 16, a rival family ambushed us. Killed my father. My mother." Claire's chest tightened. "I survived," Dominic continued, his voice hollow. "And I learned that survival isn't enough. You have to be willing to destroy anyone who threatens you. Without hesitation. Without mercy." "That's not living," Claire said softly. "That's just existing." Dominic finally looked at her. "What's the difference?" "Living means you have something worth protecting. Something that makes you feel anything." "I do have something worth protecting." He didn't say it, but the way he looked at her made it clear. "He means me." Claire's heart twisted. "Dominic," she started, but he shook his head. Don't say whatever you're about to say." "Why not?" "Because once you say it, we can't go back." Claire reached out and placed her hand over his. His skin was warm. Rough. Real. "Maybe I don't want to go back," she whispered. Dominic's gaze dropped to their hands. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he turned his hand over and laced his fingers with hers. They sat like that, hands intertwined, until the fire burned low. And for the first time in either of their lives, they didn't feel alone. Is he protecting her, or falling for her? Morning came too soon. Claire woke on the couch, a blanket draped over her. Dominic stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and clipped. When he hung up, he turned to her. "We have a problem." Claire sat up. "What kind of problem?" "Luca's crew hit 3 of my locations last night. They're not just looking for you anymore. They're trying to destroy everything I've built. What are you going to do?" Dominic's expression hardened. "I'm going to end this." "How?" "By going after Luca directly." Claire's stomach dropped. "That's suicide." "It's necessary." "Dominic, I'm not asking for your permission, Claire." She stood, crossing the room to him. "Then at least let me help." He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because I'm not trained. Because I'm weak. Because I won't risk you." "I'm already at risk." Claire's voice rose. "You said it yourself. Luca's men won't stop until they find me. Hiding won't change that." Dominic's jaw clenched. "This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment you brought me into your world." They stared at each other, the tension crackling between them. Finally, Dominic exhaled sharply. "What exactly do you think you can do?" Claire lifted her chin. "I can get close to him." "What?" "Luca doesn't know what I look like. He's never seen me. I can walk into one of his places, get information." "No." "Dominic." I said no. You can't protect me forever. Watch me." Claire stepped closer, her voice softer now. "I'm not helpless. And I'm not fragile. You know that." Dominic's gaze searched her face. "If something happened to you..." He stopped, his voice rough. "I wouldn't survive it." The confession hung in the air. Claire reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "Then don't let anything happen to me," she whispered. "Teach me. Prepare me. But don't shut me out." Dominic closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When he opened them again, there was something new in his gaze. Resignation. "All right," he said quietly. "But you follow my rules. No exceptions." Claire nodded. "No exceptions." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Dominic taught her how to move without being noticed, how to read a room, how to identify exits and threats. He gave her a phone with a single contact, him. "If anything feels wrong, you call me," he said. "Immediately." "I will." "I'm serious, Claire. One wrong move and you're dead." She met his gaze. "I know." Dominic stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I need you to understand something. Once you step into that world, there's no guarantee I can get you out. I trust you." His expression tightened. "You shouldn't." "But I do." Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Claire closed her eyes, breathing him in. "This is real. Whatever this is, it's real." The plan was simple. Claire would go to one of Luca's bars, pose as a waitress looking for work, and gather information on his movements. Dominic would be nearby watching. But when the night came, Claire's nerves were raw. She stood in front of the mirror, wearing a plain black dress and minimal makeup. She looked like a stranger. Dominic appeared in the doorway. "Ready?" he asked. "No." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Dominic crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "If you want to walk away, you can. Right now. No judgment." Claire shook her head. "I'm not walking away." "Why?" She turned to face him fully. "Because you didn't walk away from me." Dominic's gaze softened. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. "Come back to me," he whispered. "I will." He kissed her then, slow, deliberate, full of everything he couldn't say. When he pulled away, his voice was rough. "Let's go." The bar was loud, crowded, and reeked of smoke and cheap liquor. Claire stood outside, her heart hammering. Dominic's voice crackled in her earpiece. "I'm watching. You're not alone." She took a breath and pushed open the door. The noise hit her immediately. Music, shouting, laughter. She made her way to the bar. A man with greasy hair and a stained apron looked up. "Help you?" "I'm looking for work," Claire said. "Heard you might need a waitress." He looked her up and down. "You got experience?" 3 years. "Where?" "A diner uptown." He grunted. "All right. Talk to Luca. He's in the back." Claire's pulse spiked. "Luca's here. Right now." Dominic's voice came through the earpiece, sharp and urgent. "Claire, abort. Get out now." But it was too late. A door opened at the back of the bar, and Luca stepped out. His eyes landed on Claire, and he smiled. What would you do in her place? Claire's blood turned to ice. Luca's smile widened as he crossed the bar toward her, moving with the lazy confidence of a predator who'd already caught his prey. Well, well, he said, stopping a few feet away. A new face. Claire forced herself to stay calm. I'm just looking for work. Are you now? Luca tilted his head, studying her. Funny. You look familiar. Her heart slammed against her ribs. He knows. Dominic's voice crackled in her ear. Stay calm. I'm moving in. But Luca stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Have we met before? I don't think so, Claire said, keeping her voice steady. Luca reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. You sure about that? Claire's instinct screamed at her to pull away, but she held still. I'm sure. For a long, agonizing moment, Luca just stared at her. Then he laughed and released her. All right, sweetheart. You want work? You got it. Start tonight. He turned and walked back toward his office. Claire's knees nearly buckled. Dominic's voice came through again, quieter now. Get out. Now. But before she could move, one of Luca's men appeared at her side. Boss wants you to help with inventory in the back, he said. Claire's throat tightened. Now. Yeah, now. She glanced toward the exit. Too far. Too many people watching. She had no choice. She followed the man toward the back. The storage room was dimly lit, filled with crates and boxes stacked against the walls. The man gestured toward a clipboard. Count these. Make sure the numbers match. Claire nodded, picking up the clipboard with trembling hands. The man didn't leave. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, watching her. Claire started counting, her mind racing. Dominic can't get to me in here. I'm on my own. She glanced toward the man. Do you need something? Just making sure you don't steal anything. I'm not a thief. Everyone's a thief in this business, sweetheart. Claire's jaw tightened. She turned back to the clipboard, trying to look busy. Then the door opened. Luca walked in. The man straightened immediately. Boss. Luca waved him off. Get out. The man left without a word. The door closed, and Claire was alone with Luca. He circled her slowly like a shark. You know, Luca said, his voice deceptively casual. I've been thinking about where I might have seen you before. Claire kept her eyes on the clipboard. I have one of those faces. No, that's not it. He stopped in front of her, blocking her path. I think you were at a diner. Couple weeks ago. Late night. Claire's pulse roared in her ears. Don't react. Don't give him anything. I work at a lot of places, she said evenly. Luca smiled. Funny, because that diner got shot up, and the waitress disappeared. Claire looked up, meeting his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about. Luca's expression darkened. You're lying. I'm not. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. Where's Dominic? I don't know anyone named Dominic. Luca's other hand shot out, wrapping around her throat. Claire gasped, clawing at his wrist. Last chance, Luca hissed. Where is he? Claire couldn't breathe. Dominic, please. Suddenly, the door exploded inward. Dominic stood in the doorway, gun raised. Let her go. Luca's grip tightened. You want her? Come and get her. Dominic's expression was cold. Lethal. I said let her go. Luca laughed, a sharp, manic sound. You think you can just walk in here and... The gunshot was deafening. Luca staggered back, blood blooming across his shoulder. He released Claire. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Dominic crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her to her feet. Can you walk? Claire nodded, her throat burning. Dominic's men poured into the room, weapons drawn. Clear the building, Dominic ordered. Now. Then he looked down at Luca, who was slumped against the wall, clutching his shoulder. You made a mistake coming after her, Dominic said quietly. Luca spat blood. This isn't over. Yes, Dominic said. It is. He raised his gun. Claire grabbed his arm. Don't. Dominic looked at her, his expression unreadable. He'll come after us again, he said. I know. But if you do this, you'll never be able to stop. Dominic's jaw clenched. Then slowly he lowered the gun. Get him out of my sight, he told his men. They hauled Luca to his feet and dragged him out. Dominic turned to Claire, his hands cupping her face. Are you hurt? I'm okay. You're not okay. She could see the rage in his eyes. The guilt. Dominic, I'm fine. I promise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should never have let you go in there. It's not your fault. Yes, it is. Claire pulled back, looking up at him. We're alive, she said softly. That's all that matters. Dominic's gaze searched her face. Then he kissed her, desperate, possessive, full of fear and relief. When he pulled away, his voice was rough. We're leaving. Tonight. And we're not coming back. Do you think this is love or survival? They drove through the night again. This time, there was no final destination. No safe house. No plan. Just the open road and the knowledge that they couldn't go back. Claire sat in the passenger seat, watching the dark landscape blur past the window. Dominic's hand rested on the gear shift, steady and sure. After hours of silence, he finally spoke. I'm taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere no one will find you. Claire looked at him. What about you? I'll handle the rest. No. Dominic's jaw tightened. Claire. I said no. I'm not letting you do this alone. It's not your fight. It is now. Dominic pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her. Do you understand what you're asking? His voice was low, intense. If you stay with me, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You'll never be free. I've never been free, Claire said quietly. Not really. But with you, I feel more alive than I ever have. Dominic's expression cracked. You deserve better than this, he said, his voice breaking. Better than me. Claire reached over and took his hand. You're the first person who's ever made me feel like I matter. Like I'm not invisible. You're not invisible, Dominic whispered. Not to me. They sat there in the dark, hands intertwined, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Then Dominic leaned across the console and kissed her. Slow, deep, full of everything he couldn't put into words. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against hers. If you stay, he said quietly, I can't promise you safety, or normalcy, or any of the things you deserve. I don't want normal, Claire whispered. I just want you. Dominic closed his eyes. Then we run. Together. They crossed state lines. Changed cars twice. Paid cash for everything. And slowly, carefully, they built a new life. It wasn't easy. They lived in cheap motels and rented apartments under fake names. Dominic still had enemies. Still had people looking for him. But he had Claire. And that changed everything. 3 months later, they found a small house on the edge of a quiet town. Nothing fancy. Just 2 bedrooms, a porch, and a view of the mountains. It felt like home. Claire stood on the porch, watching the sunset, when Dominic came up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. How different my life is now. Good different or bad different? Claire turned in his arms, looking up at him. Good, she said. Definitely good. Dominic smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. I love you, he said. The words were simple, honest, and they shattered every wall Claire had ever built. I love you too, she whispered. Dominic kissed her, slow and tender, like they had all the time in the world. And for the first time in either of their lives, maybe they did. But peace never lasts. One night, Claire woke to find Dominic's side of the bed empty. She sat up, her heart already racing. Where is he? She found him in the kitchen, staring at his phone. Dominic? He looked up, his expression dark. They found us. Claire's stomach dropped. Who? Luca's brother. Marco. How? I don't know. But he's close. Claire crossed the room and took his hands. Then we run again. Dominic shook his head. I'm done running. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm ending this. Tonight. Claire's chest tightened. Dominic, no. I have to. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You can't stop me. Dominic's jaw clenched. Claire, if something happens to you, then we go down together. He stared at her, conflict warring in his eyes. Finally, he pulled her into his arms. I won't let anything happen to you, he whispered. I know. They drove to the meeting point, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Marco was already there, flanked by a dozen armed men. Dominic stepped out of the car, hands visible, unarmed. Claire stayed in the passenger seat, her heart pounding. Marco smiled. I was wondering when you'd show up. Let's finish this, Dominic said. Agreed. Marco raised his hand, and his men raised their guns. But before anyone could fire, Claire stepped out of the car. Every gun turned toward her. Wait, she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. Marco's eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you? Someone who's tired of running. She walked forward, stopping beside Dominic. He grabbed her arm. What are you doing? Ending this, she said quietly. Then she looked at Marco. You want revenge for your brother. I get it. But killing Dominic won't bring him back. Marco laughed. And what would you know about it? I know that violence only breeds more violence. And eventually, there's no one left to fight. Marco's expression hardened. You don't know anything. Claire stepped forward, ignoring Dominic's grip on her arm. I know you're tired, she said. I know you've lost people you love. And I know that if you pull that trigger, you'll never be free of this. Neither will any of us. Marco stared at her. For a long, agonizing moment, no one moved. Then slowly Marco lowered his hand. You're either very brave or very stupid, he said. Maybe both. Marco smiled, a bitter, tired smile. Go, he said. Before I change my mind. Dominic didn't waste a second. He grabbed Claire's hand and pulled her back to the car. They drove away, the warehouse disappearing in the rearview mirror. When they were miles away, Dominic finally pulled over. He turned to Claire, his expression a mix of anger and awe. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking I wasn't going to let you die. You could have gotten us both killed. But I didn't. Dominic stared at her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her like the world was ending. When he finally pulled away, his voice was rough. Don't ever do that again. I'm not making any promises. Dominic laughed, a real, genuine laugh. And in that moment, Claire knew. They were going to be okay. Would you stay with him? They drove until dawn. This time, they didn't stop at a motel or a rented apartment. They kept going. Across state lines. Through small towns and sprawling cities. Until they found a place that felt far enough from everything they'd left behind. A coastal town. Quiet. Unremarkable. The kind of place where people minded their own business. They rented a small house near the beach. It had weathered siding, a creaky porch, and windows that looked out over the ocean. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Claire stood on the beach, her toes digging into the sand, watching the waves roll in. Dominic came up behind her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Cold, he asked. A little. He pulled her close, his arms warm and steady. Do you miss it? Claire asked quietly. Miss what? Your old life. The power. The control. Dominic was silent for a moment. No, he said finally. I don't. Claire turned to look at him. Really? That life nearly destroyed me. And it would have destroyed you too. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. This, right here, right now, is the first time I've felt like I could breathe. Claire's chest tightened. I feel the same way. Dominic kissed her forehead, his lips lingering. We're gonna make this work, he said. I know. Weeks passed. They settled into a rhythm. Dominic found work at a local construction company. Hard labor. Honest work. Claire got a job at a bookstore downtown. It was simple. Quiet. And it was enough. One evening, Claire came home to find Dominic cooking dinner. She stopped in the doorway smiling. What's this? Dinner, Dominic said, glancing over his shoulder. I'm trying to be domestic. Claire laughed. How's that going? Terribly. She crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him from behind. I think it's perfect. Dominic set down the spoon and turned to face her. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. A normal life. Someone to come home to. You deserve it. So do you. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the smell of slightly burnt pasta filling the kitchen. And it felt like home. But the past has a way of catching up. One night, Claire woke to find Dominic sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Dominic? He didn't respond. Claire sat up, placing a hand on his shoulder. What's wrong? I had a dream, he said, his voice rough. About that night. The warehouse. Marco. It's over, Claire said gently. We're safe. Are we? The question hung in the air. Claire moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. We can't live in fear, she said. We made our choice. We get to decide what happens next. Dominic looked at her, his eyes haunted. What if I can't protect you? You already have. Every single day. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I don't know what I'd do without you, he whispered. You'll never have to find out. Months turned into a year. Then 2. They built a life together. Small. Quiet. Unremarkable. And it was everything. One evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Claire leaned against Dominic's shoulder, her hand resting on his chest. Do you ever think about going back? She asked. To what? Your old life. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. Because everything I need is right here. Claire smiled. Me too. Dominic turned to look at her, his expression serious. I want to marry you. Claire's breath caught. What? I want to marry you, Dominic repeated. No big ceremony. No guests. Just us. Making a promise that what we have is real. Tears pricked Claire's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Dominic smiled, the kind of smile that lit up his entire face. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. And in that moment, surrounded by the sound of the ocean and the warmth of the setting sun, they knew. They had survived. Together. Claire stood in the doorway of the bookstore, watching the rain fall outside. It was a slow day. Only a few customers browsing the shelves. The bell above the door chimed. She looked up, ready to greet whoever walked in. But it wasn't a customer. It was Dominic. He was soaked from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead, a small smile on his face. What are you doing here? Claire asked, laughing. I missed you. You saw me this morning. I know. He crossed the store and pulled her into his arms, rain and all. Claire laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. You're crazy. Maybe. He kissed her, slow and tender. When he pulled away, his eyes were warm. Let's go home. I still have 2 hours left. Then I'll wait. And he did. He sat in the corner of the bookstore, reading a worn paperback, glancing up at her every few minutes. And Claire knew, without a doubt, that she'd made the right choice. Because love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up. Every single day. Even in the rain. The end. Would you choose love or safety? Comment below.